The words of the gospel this morning: I was hungry, you fed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. As it goes on, whatever you've done to the least of these, my children, you've done to me, says our Lord Jesus Christ. Our text for the day. That's what Jesus looks like. He's on the screen. You know, he doesn't have any clothes on. That's not uncommon. You know, before the service, I mentioned a few things about my background. I want you to know that's all basically very irrelevant to much of anything. I want to tell you who I really am. My name is Lazarus, and I often sit on your back porch. On a hot day, or when it's below zero, I'm there. I don't have any new clothes. The clothes I wear is dirty, it's torn, it's ripped, it's all I've got. I'm not very attractive. I have boils, I have sores, I have pus oozing out. I have no shoes. If I would have shoes, I couldn't wear them because my feet are so swollen. I know you wouldn't want your children or your grandchildren to have to even see me. And you wouldn't really find me that welcome around your dinner table. Maybe throw a little food once in a while like you do to the dogs. But maybe if you might invite me in and I could sit under the table with the dogs and the cats. Lazarus is real. He's also a symbol. Did you realize that 20 million people die on this planet every year of starvation? Not sickness, not old age. They don't get that old. Starvation. And the vast majority of those 20 million are under 5 years old. The fact that children grow to adulthood is in itself a miracle in many cultures, because children take the brunt of our inhumanity. The second largest group, below those who are under 5, are the old people who live to the ripe old age of about 50 years old. It's about the average age in a third world country when people die. 50, under 5. Poverty and destitution. Let me share a little bit about the difference between poverty and destitution. We have a lot of poverty in America. And the poverty in America is growing. It's not diminishing, it's growing. Particularly in our big cities, the New Yorks and the Chicagos and the Miamis, Los Angeles. Been to California lately? You ever driven around outskirts of San Francisco, right downtown Los Angeles, to see the thousands of people living in tents along the boulevards? Thousands and thousands of people. And sometimes in the morning they have to cart some away that have died overnight. It's in our country. That's poverty. And we do have a growing problem of poverty in America. But that's not destitution. There's a big difference between poverty and destitution. Destitution is when you have no resources. You see, if you're poor in America, there's still always a place to go. I'm sure you support soup kitchens. We all support soup kitchens. And that's poverty. But you're not going to die in America because of poverty. There's a place to go. There's a place to get warm. Wintertime, where I come from in South Florida, we are inundated with many people that come from the north to go under the sun. Psychologists tell us that when people have troubles in life, whether a divorce or loss of job, they will move toward the sun. They'll move toward where it's warmer, whether it's in Texas or in California or in Florida or in Louisiana. Wintertime, we see many people on the run. That's poverty. But there's always a place to get a bite of food. Destitution is when there's no place to go. There's no option, and you will die, or your children will die. You see, I have been around the world many times. I learned that there's more to life in Iowa, in America. That's one on our southern border. Both my wife and I have been on all 7 continents in many, many countries in the course of ministries. And throughout the countries, we see there are people with phenomenal wealth, and there also is great destitution. Destitution where the end result is death. 20 million a year. And then we have another 50 million who are getting close to that point. To try to understand, at least for a person like me, I'm a slow learner. I never thought I'd see anything worse than carrying a gurney to a helicopter in Vietnam, not knowing if the body's alive or dead. This is horrible, human being. What we do to each other, it's horrible. I was wrong. There's something much worse than that. So when I walked on the garbage dump of Guatemala City, on a given day, 3,500 people are on the garbage dump in Guatemala City looking for a piece of bread. And so many are children. So many are children, dirty faces, no shoes. To think what destitution is, you have to see it. There are many things in life that unless you've experienced it, you really won't understand, like it was with me. I didn't understand. I know what poor poverty is, but to see destitution is something different. Destitution is probably symbolized just as well as anything else by what people will eat when your children are screaming with hunger. Your children, their bodies are wretched with phenomenal pain. You can count their ribs, and they haven't had a bite to eat for days. I've been told, I've never experienced this, but I've been told there's no hunger like a hunger pang. And to understand that a mother and a grandmother, what do you give the kids? There's no food, no refrigerator, no electricity in many places. What do you give them? What they do in Haiti, they also do this in El Salvador. They go down by the riverbank, they scoop up a little mud and clay and make a little cookie about that big, and make a lot of them and put them out in the sun to dry. When a child is screaming for hunger, I have had no food, they give them what we call a sugar cookie. This is a little sugar cookie made out of mud and clay. Put a little sugar on it, maybe a little Kool-Aid, a little flavor, give them some flavor. When that gets in the stomach, it does take away the hunger pang because there's something in the stomach for a short period of time. You can take some certain bark of the trees and smash it up with a little water or mud. That'll sort of do the same thing for a short period of time. But there's something else in this little sugar cookie you don't see, and the mom doesn't see, and she doesn't understand. And that's called bacteria. Depending upon where they got that mud and clay, and most of the time, so the animals roam too, in that mud and that clay. And we plead with the mothers, don't give this to your children. It'll make them more sick. And we'll get you some food. We'll get you some food. Hold on for a couple hours. I'll get you some food. But now here comes the dilemma. How do you communicate to an illiterate woman? What is a bacteria? What do you mean? It works for my kids. My grandmother used it too. How do you explain that? When more often than not, she might run away from you or me and go to the voodoo priest. And go to the voodoo priest and ask for some incantations. You see, voodooism or any strange god will build within people a concept of fear and guilt that somehow the god is punishing me. There are dragons and there are bad places, bad people. We even make little computer games about the dragons and things. Be careful with the grandkids about that stuff. Because so often, when people are in denial of the divinity in God, the denial is because of fear. And somehow people have often learned a God is an ultimate judge. There's a valid aspect of that. But they haven't heard the good news. They haven't heard that we worship a God of grace and mercy and forgiveness and love and new beginning. A God who's your friend. And that is a challenge we have to communicate to the children. God is your friend. When I speak theologically, I don't use theological phrases much anymore. I've got a wall full of degrees. They cover the holes in the wall. But when I talk to kids, I try to talk to something they might understand. And I will refer to a friend. I ask all of these kids, do you have any friends? And most of them say, well, yeah, but not really. They're sort of in neutral land. And let me tell you about a friend. Let me tell you a friend who loves you, who cares for you. He loves you so much, he wants you to have many good things. But you have to listen to him. He will come to you. He will talk to you. He can walk with you. And then I tell him a story. A lot of stories in the Bible. Jesus preached most of the time in story. Story and miracle. And a miracle is based on a story, and a story based on a miracle. To communicate. Don't talk about justification, sanctification, the teleological suspension of the ethical, all of which is good for a Saturday debate with your colleagues. Talk about your friend. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus, and he loves you. Don't be afraid of him. Don't be afraid of Jesus. And it's an amazing thing how the power of the Holy Spirit works through the roots, works through the darkness of fear and removes that fear so that they know Jesus. You see, we even joke about this once in a while, don't we? Something happens, God's going to get you. God's not going to get you. God's going to envelop you with his arms, whatever the trials and tribulations of your life might be. And he doesn't feed you with bacteria unto death. We read already in the liturgy this morning about the bread of life. The bread that sustains us. It's in the hymns. The food that gives us life. He who drinks of me will never thirst. And he who eats of my body and blood will never hunger or thirst again. It's called the gospel. And that's what Food for the Poor is all about. It was only 36 years ago that a very devout Christian on a business trip to Haiti discovered the abject poverty in Haiti. And he went to Publix grocery stores. He was in business. He worked with a shipping company. He owned it. He asked Publix, he said, I want some food. I'm going to start feeding the people in the Caribbean because they're so absolutely impoverished and destitute. And they laughed at him and said, what do you need, feed the world? They almost made light of it and gave him a 100-pound sack of beans and said, here, go feed the world. And that's how he started. Only 36 years ago, with a 100-pound bag of beans. Last year, Food for the Poor, which is an ecumenical organization. I'll talk about that for a second. But last year we shipped out $1 billion. That's with a B. $1,300 million worth of resources to the destitute in 17 countries in Central America and in the Caribbean. Our admin costs, administrative costs, people talk about this sometimes in many organizations have high admin costs. Our admin costs last year were 3.6%. They've never been less than 5%. They've never been more than 5%, rather. They've always been less than 5% on over $1 billion budget. Because we often deal with volunteers, people from our congregations, people going on mission trips, helping out to feed the hungry. I mentioned about the ecumenical nature. We are ecumenical in the sense that there are 5 churches that work together. And they happen to be the Lutherans, all Lutherans, Roman Catholic, Methodist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian. There's something unique about those 5 churches. We all are historical. We've been around a long time. And we are all sacramental. Very important. We have different points of interpretation at points, but we all have an agreement basically on baptism. And we're not that far apart on the Lord's Supper. We are. But I preach in Missouri Synod churches. The Catholic priest preaches in the Catholic churches. The Episcopalian, that's the way it works. We work together cooperatively. And why is that so important? It's critical. If I would go as a Lutheran, say to the pharmaceutical companies, and say, I'd like to have some medicine to help with the sick in the Caribbean, I'm a Lutheran. They wouldn't give me anything. If I would go and say, I come in the name of the Christian churches in America, they'll open anything they have that we can have free, or at a very good cost. To work together. One of the great joys of my life, it wasn't a joy to work after the hurricane or the earthquake in Haiti now some years ago. But just the picture on one side of the street, food to the poor, we were repairing and building new houses. Across the street was Doctors Without Borders. Down the street was Habitat for Humanity. On the other side was Franklin Graham. We are all working together. Out in the harbor is the U.S. hospital ship Mercy, which years earlier I helped commission. So this is the picture of the church. We work together. We're not in fellowship. It's not these technical theological terms. We're working together to help people who are in destitution. We do not work with individual clergies. We do not work with television evangelists. We do not work with anybody that doesn't have an accountability trail. What I mean by that, when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, accountability and reliability is critical. We are all accountable to somebody. I'm accountable to your district president and to the president of the Missouri Synod for what I do and say in a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The priest is accountable to this bishop. So is the Episcopalian. None of us are individualistic. I get a salary. I don't raise money for offerings. When I was a parish pastor, your pastor gets a salary. He doesn't get the offering and go home with it. And that is so critical, the trust relationship, to build a trust relationship, and to understand that every penny that we receive from churches goes immediately. None of that goes into our admin costs. But even the admin costs are the lowest in the industry, because the ultimate objective is to feed the poor, the hungry. It's Matthew 25, to visit the sick, to visit the prisoner. That's what Jesus himself has done. And we sometimes lose sight of that fact. When you say, I was hungry, I was thirsty. What does Jesus look like? We don't have a picture of Jesus, but he looks like you're seeing on these pictures. He says, I was hungry, you fed me, not that little sick boy, not that little girl. First time I went to Haiti and I saw preteen kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, playing soccer out in the streets. They didn't have a soccer ball. They were kicking around a little old dirty teddy bear that didn't have a leg on it or an arm. But what caught my attention was the number of boys and girls who had no clothes on. And I'd never seen that. That's why don't these kids have clothes on? The answer is they have no way of getting them. And it still happens if we don't show pictures that are so graphic that kids will have nightmares. But we could do that to see what human conditions really are in third world countries. The stole that I'm wearing right here was made by a little girl who was found on the garbage dump in Guatemala City. She was 12 years old, had never been to one day in school. Not one day in school. We were able to clean her up, put her in school. Found out she's a real bright girl. Long story, but eventually we paid her way all the way through college and medical school. She became a doctor, a medical doctor. Her name is Louise Marie. I'll never forget it. You think it would be Marie Louise, but Louise Marie. It was about a year ago, last summer. I was reading the paper, and I have been at her home a few times. Once I was at her home, and she gave me this stole. Said when she was a little girl, she made that as a hobby. And she had about 3 of them, and she wanted me to have one. She said, I know you'll appreciate it, which I really do. But about a year ago, I was reading the paper, and I saw there was a doctor in Belgium giving a lecture to the United Nations health-concerned people on help with children in third world countries. And the lecturer was a Dr. Louise Marie from Guatemala, my friend. And I screamed at my wife and said, I know this woman. I had lunch with her at her laboratory. Her laboratory was the bottom third of her kitchen table. And she was then working with a lot of soybeans, trying to get good nutrition for kids. And I could tell you many stories, but I have to keep this short, because I could talk till the sun comes down. about poverty and destitution. But what I'd like to do is point your attention to that little brochure that's in the bulletin this morning. You take a look at that little brochure. Just take a look at the picture on the cover. Don't even open it up. Picture on the cover shows a little girl that is sort of neutral. I call it neutral. She's not happy, she's not sad, but she's empty. There's nothing there. I like to see children that are exuberant, full of energy. I like to see them even act up in church once in a while. It doesn't bother me, unless it's my own children or grandchildren. Because I like to see children have energy. Sure, they need discipline. They need to be taught about behaving in certain situations. But I'd rather see a child full of exuberance than somebody that's neutral and has no joy or no life. Those eyes are that of neutrality. We want that little girl to find the joy of life. You open it up just together and you've got two sides and you'll find a house on the left side. That's actually a rather modest home. Sometimes they are living under rocks. Sometimes it's cardboard. And you know what that will do to a tropical storm. On the other side you have the after picture. We have now built over 150,000 homes for the indigent. Many of those homes have 7, 8, 10 people, because in these countries they don't have any assisted living. They don't have nursing homes. They might have grandpa living there. They might have Aunt Mary living there. They may have 10 people in a little house that is about half the size of the chancel. That's at least a place to go out of the storms at nighttime. This morning I'm going to ask if you can provide a gift of food for the poor, and to find out the economy of our own country, which we, the wealthiest country in the world. Just amazing how people understand what a few dollars will do. Those houses cost $3,600 each. You can't build a garage in this area or any place. Certainly can't in my area. You can't build a garage for $3,600. Barely build that little house. But it's an amazing thing what $50 can do as a gift. You can feed over 400 kids. $20 you can feed over 200 kids for $20, because a meal that we give them, a bowl of soup with either beans or rice, and sometimes twice, costs us 5.1 cents. 5.1 cents. What does $20 mean to most of us? It's what we have to give for a tip, maybe if we go out to dinner with somebody. But to understand, for $20 you can feed over 200 kids. You can do over 400 for $50. Then we put in both beans and rice. The most important thing, of course, is water. Building and drinking many, many wells. Many wells. We buy little chickens, $25, you get a whole flock of chickens for the little kids. Little kids love to grow chickens. And then they learn about eggs, too. And the whole process is geared toward teaching, toward education. Our goal is not welfare. Welfare is the worst thing that we could do to anybody. Everybody that we help, like whoever, if we give them a house, and that's done by the local people. They decide who gets houses, the churches. We don't work through any government. We have nothing to do. I can't go into detail how that works. We don't do anything for the government. We work only through Christian missionaries. And we know them all backwards and forwards. We know who we're working with. And they're native missionaries, not Americans. They're the missionaries in the countries where we serve. And they're phenomenal people. Just phenomenal people. That is how we make our distributions. How do we get along with the governments? Most governments beg us to come and do more because they know what we're doing for their country. You just look, if you go to the end of the page, there's a perforated line, and you make an envelope. If you could provide a gift this morning, you could put it in this little envelope, and at the end of the service, you can greet me at the door and give me an envelope, whether it's $1 or $100, or a check $50 or $500. You know, a little fella came through one day and he put 37 cents in this envelope. And then he told me, he said, if you need more, I think I can get another quarter from Grandpa. That envelope was worth $1 million to me. Not the amount of money. That's that little boy wanted to help somebody else. And that's unusual so often for American kids. You're a lot of me first, let me get in the line. I'm thirsty, I want to get in the line first. Don't hear that. I was in the feeding line in Haiti once, and I'd filled up a little boy's bucket with 5 servings of food. The way that works is they bring their conveyances to our food centers. We've got them all on computers. We've done home checks. We know exactly who we're helping. When they can get on our food program for 6 months at a time, then they got to renew it. Well, I filled this little fella's bucket with food. And my arm was getting tired. I took a break. And then I went out in the courtyard, and I saw that fellow waiting with his bucket, staring at it, and he wasn't eating. He was waiting for his buddy to go through the line. And I simply said to him, "Aren't you hungry?" "Yeah." "Well, so you're not eating. You haven't eaten anything." He said, "No, I can't." I said, "What do you mean you can't?" "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Today's not my day to eat. The girls eat 4 days a week and the boys 3 days. This is not my day to eat." I'd never heard of that. I went into the window and got another plate, and I said to my friend, "Give me some food. I have a friend out there." I gave it to him, and I said, "This is for you. You're not going to be cheating on your sisters. You can have this, right? Eat the whole thing." He took a morsel, put the rest in his pail. I said, "Why don't you eat?" He said, "I can't." The little edge in his voice. He said, "I don't ever cheat on my sisters." In his mind, he would be cheating if he was eating. Today's not my day to eat. That's destitution. This is destitution, and yet you can rescue people from destitution. Like this 12-year-old girl who's illiterate and a world-renowned doctor, Louise Murray. P.T. Niles was a great missionary in India. Someone asked him once, "Dr. Niles, what does it mean to be a disciple of Christ?" He said, "I'll tell you very easily. Study Matthew 25. And what that means is one poor beggar showing another poor beggar where to find a piece of bread." Welcome to the world of beggars, my friends. You and I are beggars before God. I can tell God on Judgment Day, "God, I started 6, 7 churches in your name. Don't I get special privilege?" He said, "Depart from me, I don't know who you are." You might say, "I was chairman of the board of elders. I was chairman of the LWML. Look what I've all done for this church." I don't know your name. And then one stands up and says, Father, I know that man. I know that child. I know that woman. I gave them their name in the waters of baptism. They're mine. And I went to the cross for them, for you. You and I, the beggars." And Jesus says to the Father, "They are ours." The doors open, and we enter into the gates of heaven. Not because of what we've done. It's because of what Jesus has done. Our friend Jesus. And that is what our mission is to the world. Tell others about our friend Jesus. Now come to the banqueting table. Your soul may be hungry. Your spirit may be thirsty. The body and the blood of Christ is here. And he says, "Take, eat, and take drink for the forgiveness of your sins, for this is my body and my blood." And he comes to you as a dear friend, our friend Jesus. Thank you. God's peace be with you.
We now take our tithes and our offerings and we lay them before the Lord.